But anyway, that's so funny though. Like, I mean, there was a point where she was talking about Vadas. I'm like, seriously, did you guys plan this?
I know.
It was
I
like,
know.
it was as if Wendy thought to herself, well, she won't take my advice. Maybe she'll take the stranger's advice and say this to her. Yeah. And then you about the Pitta thing.
I know. I know.
Spot on.
It's so spot on. And even when she's talking about Kaphas and Charlotte, like it's so spot on. You can't argue the science behind it. And it's so fun when people do, you can do Ayurveda quizzes, you can find them online. And for the most part, you'll get a good idea of your
A
constitution.
general idea. Yeah, I've
Um,
done plenty of those. Now it's time to take action.
Well, because this will get into, like she was showing you, they check 7 levels of your pulse. So they get very specific
Yeah.
about what's going on with you. And it's really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
just really cool.
I've never done it before. I can't wait. So for nurses listening to this, you are about to meet Gillian Ehrlich.
Yeah.
She is she's got her doctorate in nursing, and she is an expert in Ayurveda as well as many other things. And she's got the Trojan horse of her personal story
Yeah.
is the perfect thing to get the Ayurveda. If you don't know anything about Ayurveda, this is a great introduction. By the end of the podcast, I was like, yeah, I'm coming to see you in Seattle and getting my punch karma on. Yeah. So everybody, after you listen to this, I think it's going to be probably a credit and a half by the time we're
Yeah.
done with it. Go over to rnegade.pro. If you haven't already gone there and registered, find the podcast, do the simple quiz and evaluation. You can get your CE credit. But we are so looking forward to introducing you to Gillian Ehrlich.
Rolling.
Renegades.
Andre and I had this big idea. Mind blowing.
I had to have the people who didn't believe in me.
Between one day and the next, everything changed.
Nurses know how to solve shit.
Renegades. We do the boring LinkedIn intro when you're not here, so you don't have to listen to me read your bio.
Oh, okay. Great.
But I would love it if you started off just like, why are you like, just your background and how you from birth to becoming a nurse.
Maybe not birth, but
No, I want to know where you grew
Um,
up. What were your
yeah.
influences? Did you always want to be a nurse? That kind of stuff. The kind of
Yeah.
stuff that a friend who knows you pretty well, if somebody says, well, what does Jillian do? And they tell him.
Yeah, it's funny that you asked me this because my dad is currently working on moving out of the house my parents lived in for 30, almost 35 years. And
Oh, God, love
so
'em.
my mom, we lived in one house from when I was 0 to 18, and then my parents have lived in one house since. And
Me too, twinsies.
oh yeah, cool. I love that. And so I was just looking it up. My mom saved everything. So I was looking at like the notes that I got sent at summer camp when I was 8 and
Aw.
my school report cards where it's like my high school, my senior year history or English composition teacher was like, Jillian is giving me whiplash with a roller coaster of her consistency and inconsistency. And sometimes she's passionate and brilliant, and other times she just won't turn anything in. And I just remember thinking,
wow.
yeah. But there was a lot of comments about how, like, I always had comments through my whole life about, like, Jillian marches to the beat of her own drum. So I grew up in Cleveland in the suburbs.
Shut up.
Oh,
Are you
I-
from Cleveland?
You were just basically saying my complete biography because I got the same kind of comments on my report card. And I'm like, this isn't about you. Like in my head, there was a voice like, this isn't about you. This isn't about you. This is about her. And then you say you grew up in Cleveland. I grew up in Cleveland. I was just there, Solon.
Oh, Solon,
I grew up in Solon. Yeah.
University Heights. Hello.
Okay. Yeah. I spent a lot of time at the Cleveland Clinic and University Heights. And then my parents, like yours, when we were all out of the house, I was the last to leave at 18. And then they moved to Bay Village. So they moved to the west side.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody, yeah.
How can I ask how old you are? Is that legal?
50. Oh, yeah. I'm 50.
Wait, I'm 50.
oh, you guys.
You're 50. I bet I'm more surprised that you're 50.
Oh, really? No, I'm
You're doing very well. Even the hair, the everything is going well for you. It's
I'm
it's
telling you, dry shampoo.
sorry, Wendy. We don't mean to exclude you,
please,
but
no,
it's a
because
Cleveland thing.
I'm intrigued with
Cleveland
this.
thing.
So
Yeah.
You guys must have been in the same places at the
Yeah.
same
We
times.
probably
And
could, what kind of, did you do any sports in high school or
I actually,
throughout?
so no, and that's part of kind of the story. I didn't do any
Good.
sports. But I was like a Coventry kid. Do you remember Coventry? Did
Oh
you ever
gosh, yeah. Passport to Peru.
passport to Peru? Yes, I just got rid of one of their bags. My
Wendy,
dad.
Passport to Peru is like was I think was probably hippies since the
Oh yeah,
1950s or whenever it opened. It like you could always reliably get, one of those
tapestries.
the hemp
Yes.
uh,
ooh, nice.
ponchos and Birkenstocks. I got my first pair of
Yep.
Birkenstocks at Passport to Peru.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
that
And then across the street was Record Revolution. So I had like the hippie, I
Yeah.
had the emo, all black, red lipstick phase, and then I had the hippie phase. And so yeah.
All right. Well,
And going to,
I was an athlete, but I was friends with everybody, and so we
oh
would have if we met, we would have been friends because I was always intrigued by the people who did what I didn't think my parents would approve of,
yeah. Oh yeah, there was
and
that.
dressed in the ways my parents wouldn't approve of. So.
Yep. Yep.
But for everybody listening, I can sum up because I know that Jillian is from Cleveland. She's one of the nicest people in the world already. She's not pretentious. Well, I mean, you don't take it personally. I just know this from, I just know this from people from Cleveland. I was in Ireland once on the west coast of Ireland, Flaggy Shore Oyster Company. It was an Airbnb experience, and
Uh-huh.
a retired marine biologist looked exactly like Jerry Garcia.
Oh
He
yeah.
he retired and then bought this wholesale seafood company, but because he had all this seafood knowledge, he did workshops. So this was
Mhm.
an oyster shucking workshop, but you learn all about the life cycle of the oyster and the
Oh,
lobster and the
so
area and
cool.
everything. And then all you can eat. He teaches you how to shuck oysters, and it
Cool.
is like a what do you call it? Not cacophony. What are those horns during Thanksgiving that they put? Is that
Cornucopia.
cornucopia? Thank you. Thank you. It was that would have given me like mental constipation if I couldn't think of that. We would have had to reschedule this podcast, I bet. Um, but while we were waiting for everybody to arrive,
Yeah.
three couples, six people walked in. I was on the other side of this little shed or shack that we were having the workshop in. I'm with my boyfriend at the time, and I'm listening. I hear about 10 seconds of their conversation. I'm like, they're from Cleveland. He's like, how do you know that? And I'm like, watch. So I go up and I'm like, Cleveland? And they're like, Chicago, which is the same thing. Cleveland, Chicago, the people are the exact same
Yep.
thing.
It's the same thing.
10
Yep.
seconds. And it wasn't
Yep.
their accent.
funny.
It was their energy. It was their demeanor. And I could tell you got the Cleveland thing. So that was a long-winded introduction about me. How are you?
I'm good. Perfect. It is. So it was a lot of Cleveland. So,
Yeah.
And it was a lot of not knowing what I wanted to do. And I got really confused. And I went to Miami University of Ohio for a year. And actually, let me take a step back because I had as a teacher in high school, Jane Esselstyn. Do you know her?
Mm-mm.
You might know her dad, Caldwell Esselstyn, who was a cardiologist at the Cleveland Clinic.
Okay.
But he wrote the book. He was in the movie Forks Over Knives.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so Jane Esselstyn who is also now a nurse, who is fantastic. And so she was one of my high school teachers, and she had worked for Outward Bound and had done all this outdoor education and was just a real go-getter. And I just met her and I thought, now I can grow up. I can be you. Like, this is, this was like, I felt like I had a way in the world. And so I got really interested in health. I didn't go to medical school. Like, this is part of my bio. I didn't go to medical school initially because I didn't see a lot of health in medical school. And so I did a lot of outdoor education. So I was working a lot of times with youth. I worked in boats out here in the San Juan and the Canadian Gulf Islands. I did backpacking with near delinquent youth in Oregon.
That's cool.
Bow drilling fires, which was a very crazy experience. This story for another time. But and I did, that's the kind of work I loved. But I really was drawn to boats because I've always been really hypermobile. And so there are ways that I was never athletic. And so what I know now about hypermobility is about kind of chronic inflammation and dysautonomia and kind of mast cell activation. And there's lots of things that go along with hypermobility. But I was always really hypermobile. And I realize now that that's why I really struggled with athletics as a kid. And where I really found my place was in the outdoors. So rock climbing I could do because it was like slow and muscle driven. Rowing, I can row. We were in these big 26-foot long open rowboats and sailboats, and
Yeah.
I could row for like 12 hours because I was seated, which is great for dysautonomia. I wasn't weighting my knees. And it was this like recurrent, repetitive work versus, sprinting.
Wow. I
That's
still
so
feel like
cool.
you're talking about me. I have to look up that hypermobility thing.
Yeah. So
I am self-centered, but usually not to this extent.
I
No,
love it.
seriously, I gotta learn more about that. Okay, so
So I did all this, 7 years of outward bound outdoor education. I worked in a lot of different places doing a lot of different things. And then my childhood friend, also from Cleveland, Anisha Derve, brought me to a class on Ayurveda. She was studying Ayurvedic medicine with Dr. Vasant Lad in Albuquerque
Yeah. Yep.
and simultaneously going to acupuncture school. And so I went and visited her, and these are the early days, like the late 90s, and you could just sit in on classes with Dr. Ladd. And I was like, wait, what? Like I learned about Ayurveda and I was like, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, like these three constitutional types. And what do you do with them? And how do they describe you? And I took it back to my outward bound students, and I could not believe the results that I essentially got out of my students and
Oh,
how
true.
much more patient I was, how much better my teaching was. I felt like,
wow. So when you understood their disposition, you could
yeah,
serve them better because you understood what you were.
Even
yeah. So there's, yeah. And it's a body, mind, spirit approach, a personality. It's, what health things go on with you. And so I remember this one very skinny mini kid who had just turned 14. That was our minimum age. She'd been 14 for like 2 weeks. Talked fast, moved fast, so very Vata, and Vata learns quickly but forgets quickly.
yeah.
So I taught her how to anchor the boat, and I just rapid fired these instructions, and she did a beautiful job. And in the past, I would have expected her to remember that a week later, but I knew now from
Yeah.
Ayurveda that
Yeah.
her highlight,
Wow.
I could tell what her constitution was. I could tell how to give her instructions and then what to realistically expect of her later. And so it totally changed my perspective. And it's a medical science. Ayurveda is a 10,000-year-old system of medicine, cradle to grave and beyond, because, Hinduism has all that reincarnation. So it's, but it's cradle to grave in the medical system. And so I got really interested in medicine from there. And so I went back for nursing because I looked at nursing and I looked at going to med school, and med school still looked miserable. Like you were going to have to be inside for a lot of years and sacrifice sleep and not be able to cook food or go outside. And I just thought, what a miserable life. And so,
And and I love that
That's great.
nursing is a natural when you're introduced to Ayurveda first, nursing is
yeah,
a natural framework for it because it's
Totally.
like just what you said about the kid. You've got just instructions to
yep,
deliver. You are looking at her body type, you're looking at her energy, her cognition. So you're
yep,
already looking at her in a holistic way through what you learned from Ayurveda. And
Yep.
yep.
nursing is just like a perfect framework for that. I love that.
Well, and then in nursing school, I learned about like the history of nursing, and I was like, oh my God, how is it like this is
Should have
brilliant.
read it.
Even Clara Barton and Florence Nightingale, we talk about a lot, but like
Yeah.
Lillian Wald, amazing. Like all that, the start of the visiting nurse service in New York City, the Kentucky frontier midwifery. I can't remember exactly how the words go, but like the midwifery services in Kentucky, like just nursing is an incredible science. And I can't remember if it's Lillian Wald, there was another name, but they had the Henry Street settlement,
Yeah.
and these were
Community
nurses.
health nursing. Nurses rose to the occasion going, okay,
Yep,
we don't have
yep,
enough doctors to get into these places, so we'll just train our nurses. And
yep.
then
And I
nurse
remember
practitioner came out of that.
yep. And I remember there was a story where there was one female, and I can't remember what her story, I can't remember what her name was, but she was in a class of like men studying medicine, and some kid ran in from the street, and this was in the like 1890s or 1910s, something like that, and said, so and so just got run over by a cart and nobody moved. And so this one woman was like, oh, for God's sake. And like went out to take care of the patient. Like the whole point is to take care of patients.
Yeah.
And what was really insightful for me was reading the social transformation of American medicine by Paul Starr. Do you know that book?
No.
Oh my God, it's so good. So Paul Starr does the original, our American medical system really came from the British system, and the British system was composed of three roles. There was a physician who mostly did observation. Like a lot of times they didn't even touch the body because it was like human bodies were dirty somehow. There was the barber surgeon who did all of the cutting, the stitching, the sewing, and the bone setting. And that's that, barber pole, you cut hair, you cut tissue. And then there was the herbalist that became the pharmacist. And so that was the system that was brought to the US in the 1700s when folks were coming over in boats. But they didn't really have, herbalists in the 1700s didn't necessarily know the herbs of the Americas. And it's racism. They weren't about to ask. Who could possibly know what herbs?
Yeah, look at those savages. They can't have any knowledge for us.
Yeah, exactly. So, racism really prevented. And so there was a lot of these doctors, people who I think have this healing tradition inside of them. And the 1700s were really kind of screwed. And by the 1800s, the oldest, can you name the oldest national medical association in the United States?
Yeah, it was not holistic. It's homeopathic.
Yes, it's the homeopaths. So they were like 3 years before the American Medical Association formed. So when we look at what is the American history of medicine, homeopathy actually organized first. And then we had the chiropractors, and then we had what were called physicians. And the AMA, they were just real bossy. And so
do you know that the history of the Flexner report, right?
Yes. Yeah. And
do you know that?
Yeah.
In a very brief summary, all of the people who had money, the Rockefellers, I think there was another big old money family.
So John Rockefeller hired Abraham Flexner.
Okay.
Yeah, who just put out all this propaganda against homeopathy and in favor of pharmaceuticals instead, and making homeopathy look like quackery and whatever. Right. Meanwhile, because they wanted to promote the main pharmaceutical we had, which was Quicksilver, which was mercury. So, but the Flexner report was debunked, but the damage had already been done. And that's when the AMA and our conventional medical system took a foothold above homeopathy. But Gillian, it's an amazing history. We're missing out on so much.
And if it's okay, can I dive in a little bit further?
Yeah, this is so educational. I love this.
Oh, good. So in the 1800s, everybody was there was so much ego involved with medicine because we didn't actually have treatments. And so there was so much, and it was very true that you could wash a doctor's laundry for 3 months and then hang out your own shingle as a physician and say, I've been mentored and trained. And so we didn't really have a lot to offer in Western medicine. And Johns Hopkins in the 1890s actually became this beacon on a hill because they actually looked at research. And so suddenly we had this one light of this evidence-based philosophy and approach. And so when Rockefeller hired Flexner went around and everybody heard he was from Rockefeller and they were like, oh, I'm going to get money. So they threw up in their one closet with their one shitty microscope that didn't even have enough clean slides and et cetera. And so Flexner came back and he basically said the state of American medicine is abysmal, which was true.
And nothing's changed.
And nothing changed. Yes.
Oh, that's scary.
And what he said was really, but the problem was with the conclusions that Flexner came to was that women, minorities, and integrative or alternative medicine, or homeopathy and chiropractic are the problem. And evidence-based, male physicians practicing real medicine, like evidence-based, like doing research, is the only solution. And so it was appropriate that Flexner said, we need to change things. This shit sucks. But the solutions were so racist and so sexist and so classist that it was not tenable for a period of time. But it did launch this period where a lot of money went into research. And so for those first 50, 60 years of the 19th century, suddenly we had antibiotics, in the 1920s with penicillin. Suddenly there were actual treatments. And so when this money went into research and when we started developing better medicines, it looked like, oh, right, this was the appropriate solution. Look how great we're doing. But it was not. And that foundation really started to crack in the 60s, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, with the onset of, the first nurse practitioner program in 1965, needing medical homes for complex pediatric cases in Colorado. And then, Nixon's Secretary of State, James Rustin, I think his name was, who had an appendix burst in China. And then using acupuncture as a way to quiet the nausea and for anesthesia. And Maharishi coming over with Ayurveda in the 60s. Ayurveda is harder to see because Chinese medicine, even if it's 5 elements and it's constitutionally based, it has acupuncture, it has a specific visible therapy that people can kind of latch onto in terms of their understanding. And Ayurveda doesn't necessarily have that easy of a way to like latch. It is a very subtle medicine at its root and its philosophy. And so it's much harder to kind of draw a circle around it to say, this is Ayurveda.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fascinating.
It's a lot of that in the social transformation of American medicine, like all that information. Because
that's where I learned all that.
Oh my gosh.
Since then, I read that probably 20 years ago, and since then I see it in all these other places. But that's a lot of what's in social. And then they talk a lot about. So it came out in 1984. There's been a revised version, and so then they talk about HMOs and kind of like where we are with medicine now. And what I would say in my experience, so I became a nurse. In 2003 is when I became a nurse. And then I became a nurse practitioner I got my master's in 2010, my doctorate in 2011. I was certified in functional medicine in 2014. And then I ended up studying about 6 or 7 years with an integrative neurologist, an incredible neurologist out here in Seattle. And I learned just a shit ton about the neuro-immune axis. We check for dysautonomias like POTS, which is a much higher percentage. We're seeing it bloom now with COVID, post-COVID. A lot of long COVID has dysautonomias. And then this triad of these hypermobility or connective tissue disorders, which can be congenital like Ehlers-Danlos or acquired like autoimmune. There can be autoimmune conditions, but also mast cell activation, which is like allergic to the world. And then so hypermobility, mast cell activation, and dysautonomias like POTS. And so these things, but now we've expanded that triad, that original research proven triad or whatever, evidence-based triad, to what we typically call the pentad. Some people call it the septad, but it can come with other things like craniocervical instability. So your head sits down onto where your cord comes through, and it interrupts cerebrospinal fluid flow. So it might look fine on an MRI, but if you do these certain these certain 3 measurements, you can look for craniocervical instability or tethered cord, or you can look for long, reactivated Epstein-Barr virus or EBV or mono. You can look for these chronic infections, even like Lyme or long COVID, which really we think of as like a pebble in the shoe of the immune system. So the way that I talk, sorry, I'm doing a lot.
I love that. No, I love that's a great metaphor.
So that metaphor is really like you have a pebble in your shoe and you got a problem. You walk 10 miles. Now you've got a pebble, a blister, a limp, a hip pain, a back pain, a neck pain, and you're like pissed. You're irritable and your mood is off and you can't sleep. And you would never think to get a massage for your neck to treat a pebble in your shoe. But the truth is that there's these neuro-immune reverberations, there's these ripples that come out from anything that happens to us. And so we can look at that individual trigger like COVID, like mold, like Lyme, like trauma, like concussion. I see a lot with concussion and post-concussive syndromes. And suddenly we have all these other things. So you can treat the initial thing, but if you take that pebble out, if you've already walked 10 miles, that blister is there. And if you don't do rejuvenation and restoration, you're not actually going to solve the problem. So you can take that pebble out. You can treat Epstein-Barr. You can treat, theoretically, viruses are hard to treat, but you can treat a lot of these things, but it's kind of like, why does the person not get better? And it's because of these reverberations through the neuroimmune system. And Ayurveda in its unending brilliance has 8 different branches to it, and one entire branch is called Rasayana, and it's restoration and rejuvenation. And so Rasayana is where
I spell that
Rasayana, Rasayana.
I knew it was going to be difficult for me. Okay.
And so the idea is that it's not enough to just take the pebble out of the shoe. You have to restore the integrity and alignment and mental clarity, the intelligence in each cell is what Ayurveda says. Every cell is a center of intelligence. And so you have to restore the intelligence and the clarity along that entire neuroimmune axis. And of course, it's the neuroimmune endocrine, neuroimmune gastro, but the microbiome shifts when that happens. If you're irritable and you're not sleeping, then you're eating different foods and now your microbiome is shifting. And so you would never think about probiotics for a pebble in your shoe, but lo and behold, that's the reality of what human beings are. And as I've been in this neuro-immune world the last 10 years, I see it getting closer and closer and closer to Ayurvedic principles.
Interesting.
It's been
Absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah,
It's
like
awesome to watch.
psychoneuroimmunology,
Yes, exactly.
psychoneuroendoimmunology
Yes.
is like my wheelhouse. So I've published my own research in it, but
Oh my God,
that's for another
fantastic.
time because of course I'm trying not to be as self-absorbed. But because I am,
I approve. I
while you
endorse.
no, but Jillian, while you were talking, like anytime somebody, and it's rare, but anytime somebody is able to put those pieces together, once again, my mind blows up.
Yeah.
Because and the pebble in the shoe metaphor, like you couldn't get any better than that. And I love how you're, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going around the houses, but I'll come back to a shadow of a coherent point. Um, it's now I lost myself.
I know.
I had a metaphor for the metaphor, but anyway, please continue. I will get back to that. How do you, so in 2014, you got your PhD, no, functional medicine.
Yeah.
And then what did you start doing? And where do you serve people that you can put all of these pieces together for them?
Yeah.
So my whole goal when I left the Ayurvedic Institute in 2001 was to work in a conventional system, like to bring Ayurveda into a conventional system. I never wanted to be outside the system and be like on the fringes. And now when I look at what the internet has become, which I did not know of in 2001, I'm like, I should have totally stayed on the fringes. But so I worked at, so when I finished nursing school, I worked as a med tele nurse at Harborview Medical Center, which is our downtown inner city hospital. Started out as like the 6-bed King County Hospital in 1906. And it's like, the floor I worked on had dialysis, and it was like, if you were like blind, homeless, had one leg, were on dialysis, had a ton of trauma, and had Hep C. You were my patient. And
That's
so
the place for you. I got a girl for you.
and I was there for about 8 years, and I loved it. I loved every second of it, most seconds of it. I loved most of it.
Yeah.
But what I saw was like unreplaceable. Like I watched people die on cardiac monitors. We did the 3 East nurses, the floor I was on were the code nurses. And so for every, when there were codes all over the hospital, the 3E, we were the nurses who would go stand by whoever was running the code and do all the code documentation. So I got to see how a lot of codes were run, and I did a lot of CPR, not a lot. I did some CPR, like, these were like life and death situations that we were a part of. And I really enjoyed like seeing those edges of humanity. Because I felt like if you're going to treat in the middle, you have to know those edges. And so that was really important. After I got my nurse practitioner license, I worked in our medical respite there, the Harborview's medical respite, for about 4 years as we first opened that program. And so that was for unhoused men and women, adults who had an acute medical issue, but really needed wraparound care. So this was, we had social workers and we did wound care. So they would have to come to see the nurse each day. And I was there as a nurse practitioner. So that's where I was starting to kind of write orders. And we did a lot of wound care for the black tar heroin that we used to see that you don't really see as much anymore because there's so much fentanyl everywhere. But like working with people again on these like very human levels was what I loved. So like I was doing a dressing change on this guy's butt at one point. He was such a sweet kid. And I was like, there was some redness, and I was like, and he had down his legs some swelling, and I was like, we really need to get a duplex. And he kind of turned around and said, we're moving in together? Like we're getting a duplex? And I was like, oh God, that's cute. But yes, that's so cute. And I just really, the patients were so endearing in a lot of ways. But I couldn't do any Ayurveda there. And it really felt like I was catching people at the bottom versus preventing.
Yeah.
And so I switched over to Swedish Medical Center because I still was like committed to doing Ayurveda and functional medicine now in this, like in the system context. So Swedish Medical Center is owned by Providence, which is the third largest nonprofit healthcare, institution in the US. And Swedish has 19 primary care clinics and 4 hospitals, and I can't remember how many urgent cares. And so I was buried in one of the primary care clinics here in Seattle. And I was with another clinician who invited me on, who was functional medicine trained, who's fantastic, Dr. Arthi Chandra. who's
Oh,
a
that's
family medicine.
familiar. That's really familiar.
Oh, she's fantastic.
Chandra, yeah.
Chandra, yeah. So she's great. And so she kind of brought me in to try to build this functional medicine program. And so over the next 6.5 years, I saw over 10,000 functional medicine patients, complex chronic illness in an insurance outpatient. It was very hard. I was working 60-hour work weeks. And I just, after, it just wasn't tenable. It just
Yeah.
wasn't,
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
No, that's the problem with trying to fit integrative practices into the allopathic framework. It
Right.
doesn't work because it's like this, but it takes so much time.
Yep.
So there's people like you, the kind of people that we gravitate to interview are they're creating this parallel functional medicine. And but I mean, that has its hangups too. I mean, people can, but I love that you're telling the story of creating a parallel system so that you could use serve with your gifts to the fullest extent.
Yeah.
So so then what happened?
So if you're a nurse, what's the feeling you associate with going to the mailbox and seeing that notification that says your license is up for renewal in 90 days? Do you go, yes? Or, oh, right? Why? I mean, it's not like they're hard to get. You have 2 years and there's so much free stuff out there. And yet we drag ourselves across the finish line, kicking and screaming because they suck. They're boring and antiquated and the delivery mechanism is inconvenient. And the thing is, if you're a nurse, we love to learn. We're always listening to podcasts and audiobooks and YouTube videos because we're just curious. But we have to pick through this pile of crap so that we can remain a nurse. Well, we created RNegade.pro to change that. We wanted nurses to be able to get credit for the stuff that they're naturally inclined to do anyway. It starts with a podcast. And then we're creating courses, and we want everything we do to feel like what you're naturally doing. The research shows that that's how we learn and retain best. Check it out. Pick one. See what you think. So maybe when you go to the mailbox next time and get that notification, you'll have that, yes, because they're already done.
So I finally was like, in 2016, a patient came to me about her, seeing me and her integrative neurologist. And her neurologist kept doing things. And I was like, who is this neurologist that's doing things? And so I started sending 1 million patients to her. And she had just opened a private practice. And in early 2017, I was kind of like, can I come see you? Like, what are you doing? We started texting about patients and talking about patients. And I went to watch her.
When you said she was doing things, so you were noticing a positive effect from the things she was doing?
She was doing skin biopsies and autonomic testing and meds that I had never seen or heard of before, like pyridostigmine and midodrine and even rapamycin and, things that now we hear a lot more about that at that time I was like, who are you? And she was just a really forward-thinking integrative neurologist. And so I sat with her through patients and she said, well, this is what I would do. What would you do? And I said, well, I would say from the Ayurvedic perspective, this is how we would address these symptoms. And by lunch, she was like, you have to join me. So I ended up, when I couldn't tolerate Swedish anymore, God bless Swedish, but I was unable to maintain those hours and workload. Bless you.
Bless you.
I went over and I worked with her, and I started out working with her in 2018 and 2019. And then in November of 2019, I moved over full time. I was like, all right, let's build this clinic. Let's do this. And then of course, 4 months later, the pandemic hit and we were both like, holy shit, what do we do now? And so she ended up going more in the direction of long COVID and concierge care. And I ended up going in this direction of this integrative clinic, this bigger integrative clinic. And so where I practice now is Ayurveda Health, and we are a private clinic. We bill, cash pay, and we give super bills. We do run medications. We try to run medications labs and things like IVIG through insurance. We do write referrals for insurance to cover other services like PT, OT, counseling, all those things. We do autonomic testing here, and we've developed this really solid crew. That's myself. That is Juliana Giles, who's a local naturopath who does integrative oncology, Ayurveda, and
Wow.
entheogens, which is like psilocybin, cannabis, and ketamine. We do a lot of ketamine work here for pain and for psychotherapy. Then we've got Carly Squires, who's also a naturopath and runs our regenerative medicine program. So she does our plasmapheresis intakes, does our stem cells, we harvest autologous stem cells and infuse them here either into joints. She does all of our joint injections.
You do all the
therapy
things.
Wow.
and ozone. And then we also have Brianna Cardenas, who's a physician's assistant, whose focus is really the Ehlers-Danlos, hypermobility, CSF, craniocervical fluid, cerebrospinal fluid leaks, so CSF leaks, and does a lot of like eagles and Chiari and compressions and tethered cord. And she does a technique called fascial counterstrain, which is very gentle but effective for restoring flow.
Is that
And
like
then
more gentle than myofascial release, or is it
Yeah.
the same thing?
it's kind of like craniosacral for your body,
Okay.
your head and your body. And then we've got Shane Judy, who's a family med MD, who's functional medicine certified, and whose love is really in the cardiovascular realm. And then we've got Jennifer LaValle, who is has her master's in Ayurveda and who's a massage therapist. And so she does all of our Ayurvedic hands-on work as well as diet and lifestyle counseling. So we
Nice.
do full panchakarmas here. Panchakarma
You do?
is like the original
Let's
detox.
go, Wendy.
I know. Seriously. I'm like, yeah.
We have
Yeah.
to do market research.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
Yeah.
So
Oh my
panchakarma
gosh.
is when we talk about, how do you do, what does rasayana mean? So a lot of rasayana means working with mitochondrial health, working with the mitochondria is rasayana, working with the body and the mind and the spirit. We have treatments that we call nervous system resets.
Mhm.
And then we do the diet and lifestyle counseling. And then we also have the panchakarma, which is this like, it's a week of treatments. Like if you go to
Right.
Bali or India, it can be a month or 3
Right.
months.
That's what I was going
Here,
to say.
it's
How
like
long do you do them?
Yeah, it'll be a week of treatments, dedicated treatments. And it's
Do you do prep beforehand? Do you have people get ready to come
Yep.
in for the week? Yep.
Yep. So we do the Purva Karma beforehand, which is the preparation. I'm actually doing my Panchakarma next week. I don't do it in our clinic just because I don't want to,
Sure.
you don't want your boss walking around in it.
Where do you do it then?
There's a massage therapist that lives closer to my house. And
Okay.
so I do it with her.
Good.
Yeah.
Do you know
But, yeah.
Larissa Carlson?
What's that?
Do you know Larissa Carlson?
That name sounds somewhat familiar, but I
Yeah,
don't think
she's big in the Ayurveda world. She now does a podcast, but she's out of Kripalu and she
Oh.
studied with John Douillard. So
Uh-huh.
she came up in the ranks with John Douillard. And
Yeah.
she's now very popular when you search it out from people who are on the yoga side or like health and wellness.
Yeah.
Larissa's absolutely phenomenal. And quite honestly, I
fantastic.
should introduce you to because you should be on each other's podcasts.
Sure.
She's
That'd be
fantastic.
great.
That's how I know. So I came up through the Kripalu side.
Yep.
And so Larissa was my Ayurvedic practitioner
Uh-huh.
back in the day. And even a couple who still live in Massachusetts up there and still run retreats for Panchakarma and stuff. You can still go to them.
Yes,
yeah,
I
such
can't
cool
remember
stuff.
what's the name of the person who ran their Panchakarma or their Ayurvedic program for years? Because I can't
Well, that
remember.
was Larissa. She ran she was their, so it could have been somebody after her, but she was the original. I ran the Ayurveda department for Kripalu.
There's somebody else who I know who I actually met in Pune in 2005 in India, who was also deeply involved. And Hillary Garibaldi.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Was she before Hillary or after then? I can't remember. But yeah, she's a long time Kripalu.
Yeah, so I've loved Hillary for a long time.
Mhm.
We know each other a long time now.
I'm not turning around because I'm getting bored. You two just reminded me of something. But I'm glad you're talking about Ayurveda again.
Yeah.
Because in order to check the box for the California State Board of Registered Nursing and to make this CE worthy, because I have to keep myself in line. I could go in so many different directions with you right now. The metaphor for your metaphor that I was thinking of before is I have this book, which I was just turned around looking for. I was saying how when you were working with that integrative neurologist.
Mhm.
Sorry, I hate that. And you were saying the more you spoke, the more you saw it going back to your Ayurvedic roots.
Yeah.
And this book is like Jesus, the sayings of Jesus, the sayings of Buddha, the Bhagavad Gita, and it's got like four either, their words or the sacred texts, and it has their title on and what they said and how it's the exact same thing. Like
Yes.
upstream,
Yep.
upstream when you're dealing with not the mind, body, spirit connection. I hate the word connection because it means there's separate things that have a bridge. No,
Yeah.
it's just all one thing.
Yeah.
But I would love for you to speak more for the nurses who are listening to this. Just give us a 101 about Ayurvedic medicine and the Pitta, Vata, Kapha, and is there a quick 101? I'm sure you do this all the time. Like, is there a quick 101 so that we can call this kind of an introduction to Ayurveda for nurses as well as an introduction to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ayurvedic medicine. So to back up, the world of Ayurveda is 10,000-year-old, 5 to 10,000-year-old medical system. It's still in practice in India today, which is very important to recognize. It's a 5.5-year medical degree, and there's over 1 million registered practitioners. We call them Vaidyas, or that's the word for essentially physician or doctor is Vaidya. So there are over 1 million registered Vaidyas in India. So this is not like just ancient. This is like current as well today. There's over 150 medical schools in India teaching Ayurvedic medicine, which is on par with the number of US medical schools. There is no current licensing in the United States. And so Vaidyas who come with the BAMS degree from India typically need to get some other recognized license in the US to practice. And typically that's either an MD or a naturopathic degree, or people can do counseling or physical therapy, or, they usually add, or massage therapy even, to do the treatments. But ultimately in India, it's an MD and you're on par. So there's that component. The second piece to know is that Ayurveda comes out of like a deep philosophy, which is called Sankhya philosophy, which we won't go into today, but it's suffice to say that Ayurveda recognizes that we are spirits in the material world. We are spirits first, and then we become a physical body, which I feel like in medicine, we think of differently. We think of the body first.
Keep it alive as long enough so the spirit doesn't leave it.
Yes. And then we think of the mind as like secondary. But when you understand Ayurveda, you understand that the medicine of the mind, if you think you're about to get hit by a bus, there's a whole host of physical things that happen. And our body, our neuro-immune axis, that's why I keep thinking about it, is our neuro-immune axis is constantly making that judgment call: hit by a bus, not hit by a bus, hit by a bus, not hit by a bus. And we really think of that as those two legs of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight versus the rest and digest. And so our body is consistently getting messages from our environment about how to build and grow. And what Ayurveda says is that there are 5 elements. It's a 5-element system, just like Chinese medicine, but those elements are different. So, which is kind of interesting. So in Chinese medicine, I don't know them. I know metal, wood, fire, air,
water.
But in Ayurveda, they are ether or space, and then air, and then fire, and then water, and then earth. They go from subtle to gross, from things you can't even like fathom to earth, which is structure. And these 5 elements essentially are divided. The qualities, there's 20 qualities or 10 pairs of opposites that describe these elements. And then these 10 pairs of opposites are collected into essentially 3 baskets called Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So at the moment of our conception, all the forces acting in the universe at that time, what our parents ate for dinner, whether they were in the back 40 or at the Ritz-Carlton, where the planets were, whether it was day or night that we were conceived, like all these different things, which season were we conceived of and what time of day, all of these different things come to make our unique constitution. And we have a unique amount and place in our body for the Vata, the Pitta, and the Kapha. Everybody has some Vata, some Pitta, some Kapha, but the ratios and the presentations are unique for each of us because they are determined at the spot at which we were conceived. And there is some controversy about how much they shift over the course of our gestation, but the thinking is that they're solidified with our first breath. It's the constitution we carry for life. There is some controversy that maybe if there's a big trauma or a pregnancy or like a guru bestows darshan or insight upon you, that your constitution can change. But typically, for all intents and purposes, Your constitution is what you carry for life. And that's called your Prakruti, that constitution. And so we can say it as in the ratios a little bit. So my constitution we could colloquially say, I'm like Vata 2, Pitta 3, Kapha 2. So I've got more Pitta than anything else, but I've got about equal amounts of Vata and Kapha underneath that.
Mhm.
You can feel the Prakruti or the constitution in the deepest of the 7 layers of the radial pulse. And the way you hold your pulse is so that your pinky finger, which we think of as our ring finger, where we put our wedding ring, our rings of love, we put on our 4th finger. And so you want that 4th finger closest to your heart. So that's how you remember, like, how do you feel the radial pulse? So you want to hold your wrist like from the back. So you want to flip your
Toward
hand.
the back.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And so that your pinky finger is most proximal and your index is most distal. And if you push down the radial pulse until it's completely occluded, and then you lift up each finger at the pressure at which the first pulse comes through, you can assess it for the 7 different characteristics of the pulse, and then kind of where it sits on the finger, and that's going to give you a sense of the Prakruti. If you now, through the course of our life, our constitution is acted on, obviously, by the external environment. The way that we would say this in modern language is genetics and epigenetics, right? It's not always our DNA. It's our RNA and our protein manufacturing. Like, that's the body we live in. We don't live in the body of the DNA. The DNA gives the instructions, but messenger RNA, protein, all of these other components are what is actually made. And so that's Prakruti and Vikruti. And so with all the seasons and time and the age and what you eat, what you're built of, what air you breathe, all of that makes our current constitution. And so health for each individual person is aligning their current constitution to their original constitution. You want to essentially balance the environment so that if it's so hot out and you're a Pitta person and heat can increase Pitta, that you do things or you don't do things that are going to balance Pitta. So you don't go for an intense run in high noon in the hot sun in July if you're a Pitta person, because it will imbalance your Pitta. So there's things that you can do, ways you can direct your life, but also things that you can do. You can do cooling foods like cucumber juices or celery juices, or fresh, you're going to eat sushi more as opposed to 5-star chili. That is going to aggravate your Pitta. And so
Wow, you know what? Can I ask a question? Because I think Wendy almost killed me. Because I'm most like, I don't know much about, I just know the very, just enough to be dangerous about Ayurvedic medicine.
Yes.
So I know Wendy's more Pitta and I'm more Vata. And when I was visiting her, she made me hike in a tank top in the snow. And she's just like, and I'm like, my Reynolds was acting up. Like I couldn't walk anymore.
Yeah.
She almost killed me. And it's because, and you knew that was intentional. I just wanted to give the folks listening an ignorant metaphor.
No, that's exactly right.
We need a break from your, we need a break. You have to step back a little bit and then dive in again to your brilliance. So but that's
it's like a faucet. You just turn it on.
Yeah.
You're ready to hear it and you turn it off when you're done.
No, you were on you were talking about celery juice. That's where I interrupted you.
Yeah, and celery juice actually does have a little bit more Pitta, but cold juices like fresh, raw, that's all supportive for Pitta. That quiets Pitta. So, and so to understand these doshas a little bit more, Vata dosha, Vata is the principle of movement. And so Vata people tend to be thin. The qualities are like thin, light, dry, mobile, subtle, restless, movable. And so Vata people tend to be thin, light. They tend to have dry skin. They can have dry bowels, which can result in constipation. They can have, when things go wrong, they tend to lose weight. They have insomnia. The mind they're the princess in the pea. So it's kind of like you can perceive everything. And so that hyperperception can also lead to sensory issues. You can have hypermobility with Vata. And so those are all the Vata characteristics. When Vata is healthy, Vata has like a lightness and an insightfulness. Vata can see between the veils of the world. So there are ways that Vata can put things together that others can't. So Vata people often are very creative, are often, they like to dance and sing and move.
Playful, spontaneous.
They're very spontaneous.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, ridiculous. Yeah, very funny, clever. So that's when Vata's healthy. Things like cold, fear, travel, stress, lack of sleep. Those are all the things that displace Vata. And then when Vata goes sideways, they lose too much weight. They get too thin. They're too fragile. They're not stable. The mind is all over the place. The emotions can be labile. The bowels can be labile. And so one of the characteristics of out of balance Vata is actually very changeable. So like you can have constipation and then diarrhea, that can be Vata, or you can have like very low weight or very, very high weight can actually be Vata. You know, person who's 400 pounds or 600 pounds, like that can also be Vata because it's these edges, these extremes. People who are very short or very tall, kind of these extremes, that can be some Vata in the system. So that's Vata dosha.
Did you guys get on before we got on and talk about me behind my back?
No, but you see,
It was exactly me yesterday, Gillian. I just did I've moved 22 times in 20 years. I just completed probably the most stressful move I've done to date. And I it's always head down, eyes forward, no problem. I'll go, no quit, never, This took it out of me. Then I traveled to Cleveland to bury my mom for the second time because she's just been in an urn on my dad's dining room table with a candle lit for 5 years. So he's like, yeah, it's time. So we did that, and he's been sick and whatever. And then I came home, and then I had to travel for Easter again, whatever. And yesterday I got on with, I've lost 20 pounds I didn't have to lose. And it just like fell off. I was a fucking basket case yesterday. I could not string a thought together. And I told Wendy yesterday, I'm like, everything will be better when the sun comes up. All I have to do is wait for the sun to come up. And I slept 10 hours and I'm fine. I was so excited to talk to you today. I had no idea that you would be talking about me behind my back. But it is.
I told her to go roll around in the grass. I said, go, when we got off the Zoom, I'm like, go put your feet in the grass. Go
I did.
And
I smoked a cigarette.
Well, nicotine, there's people who use nicotine have less Alzheimer's and less Parkinson's. So it's part of the autonomic nervous system.
It's American spirits. They're healthy. They're organic cigarettes.
Exactly. And, the things that when you learn from Ayurveda, the things that can really treat Vata is oil. So you can oleate your whole body. The emergency calm the fuck down with Vata treatment is like a warm sesame oil enema.
Ooh.
I know. So everybody is.
I'm up there all the time anyway.
I know.
No, I'm just kidding.
So that's Vata. So Pitta. Pitta is medium. Pitta is the principle of transformation, and it's kind of fire. Vata is space and air. Pitta is fire and water. And so Pitta tend to be medium body type, medium height, kind of medium everything in terms of physicality. But Pitta are the qualities are hot, light, oily, spreading, penetrating. And so all of these things, Pitta is like the principle of transformation. And so Pitta is like, I have a lot of Pitta. So I like being a detective with my patients, and I like evaluating, and I like making tables and charts, and I like data. And when Pitta people go to a party, they want to have a conversation about history, or they want to debate something. Pitta likes to argue a little bit. But then when Pitta goes sideways, which you can go sideways with spicy food, with too much heat, with not enough sleep, with getting hangry. Pitta people can get hangry. Then things go sideways and you have too much heat, which are all the itis things, all the inflammation things. And so you can get heartburn, and you can get gastritis, and you can get flushing and rashes and hives. You get redness. That's all Pitta. Or you can get mean.
Oh my gosh, Wendy. Exactly.
No, right? Yep.
I know. And they're very clever. Pitta is very like intelligent and smart. So they know exactly where to go for that Achilles tendon.
But they can be bullies.
Yeah, they can be bullies.
And make your partner go hiking
I know.
in the snow.
And Pitta people run really hot. So, when my 10-year-old was born, and we were I delivered him in the hospital because I'm a nurse. I'm a lifelong nurse. I love hospitals. So,
wow.
I know they have there's hot blankets. There's, grilled cheese and Jello. Like, I know my resources in a hospital. So I'm happy to. So, but they were like, he has a small fever. And I was like, he has a fever. And I'm like, don't give antibiotics. So we just pulled the blankets off, and lo and behold, this Pitta kid needed to have like one thin blanket in the hospital in December. And I had like 18 on me. But, it's like, he's such a Pitta kid. So some kids just run hot,
Wow.
And when it turns 50 degrees out here and it's sunny, he'll be like, Mom, I can't go outside. It's too hot. And I'm like, you have to adjust.
Yeah.
You have to acclimatize. So just to say that's Pitta. And when Pitta is healthy, we are bright and convincing and smart and helpful and can be of great service. And we can, it's the principle of transformation. So it's experiences, it's perception into experiences and memories, and it's cellular transformation into the digestion can be really strong with Pitta. And so there's things that set us off, and then when we go sideways, we're just assholes, and we're irritable, and we have inflammatory conditions. So that's Pitta.
Yep.
And then Kapha is the third constitution, and Kapha dosha is the principles or the characteristics are like stable, stout, slow, heavy, soft. There's some other ones, dull, cloudy, and it sounds like
Morose.
I know, but Kapha in India is like the va-va-va-voom body. You know what I mean?
Right.
Kapha can be so loving and stable, and it is not what we prioritize in the United States, right? Obviously, what we want in the US is everybody to be Pitta. Like corporate America is like, if you're not Pitta, hold on. What's that?
Corporate wants Pittas, the beauty industry wants Vatas.
Yeah. Although some of the beauty industry wants, there are some characteristics. So Vata also tends to have very uneven features. Like things are not necessarily, what do you call it?
Symmetrical.
Thank you. Symmetrical. So like Britney Spears is so interesting because she actually has Kapha, and you can see like Marilyn Monroe, a lot of Kapha. You know what I mean? But Nicole Richie or Twiggy, a lot of Vata. So there are some components. We want Kapha faces, and like, I don't know why we want Vata bodies in the US. I've never figured out, but the point is that Kapha is stable, is stout, and it's the principle of structure. So when Kapha is healthy, they are strong, they are stout. We can say Kapha can eat anything, poop a banana a day, sleep anywhere, and live forever.
Poop a banana. I love that. Perfect.
And when Kapha goes sideways, what's that?
Perfectly pinched off at both ends.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And when Kapha goes sideways, they can go sideways with things that are too heavy. So like processed food, too much meat, too much sleeping, too much sedentary life, like all those things are not good for Kapha. And then when Kapha goes sideways, they tend to gain weight. They tend to have congestion, like sinus congestion. They tend to make tumors or like blockages or atherosclerosis. So things that are structure that are in the way. Asthma. What are some other Kapha things? Like there's a lot of around lungs and like moisture, like too much moisture. Edema is all Kapha. So you can look at these conditions that people have.
Like Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah, Jabba the Hutt.
Is Kapha gone wrong?
Yeah, Kapha is, very much Kapha gone wrong. But also like beautiful Kapha is Marilyn Monroe. Beautiful Kapha can be Arnold Schwarzenegger. That guy is slow and methodical, Oprah, gorgeous, va-va-va-voom body, natural va-va-va-voom.
I love the va-va-voom.
Charlotte, our daughter Charlotte is Kapha.
Yeah.
And I'm like, she's just a love bug. I mean, she's just all love. Very, very specific, very slow speaking, very eye contact. Like she's our save the world child. Yeah. And
Kapha tends to learn slowly, but then remembers forever. So I have a student that I often talk about on one of my Outward Bound courses. He always looked like he was bored and not paying attention. And I did an experiment that first summer. I knew Ayurveda. This was back in 1999 or 2000. No, 1999. And, I sat down and I spent an hour with him talking about how to anchor the boat. It was a summer of like, I just experimented with these kids. And so the one kid I was like, do this, then this, then this, then this, then this. And the other kid,
you'd have to tell her again.
Yep. And I spent an hour telling him very slowly, patiently, like repeating each step multiple times. And he was like, okay. And then a week later, without any conversation in between, I was like, anchor the boat. And he was like, okay. And he just shrugged and stood up and did a beautiful job.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. This shit works.
Yeah.
Like I figured out, or not I figured out, I was taught, there's nothing brilliant about me. This is all Ayurveda. I was trained and was able to apply Kapha learning style to a Kapha kid who then was beautifully successful. And that is not a kid that I would have necessarily gotten to be successful in the past.
And then think about how we, like, this is off topic for healthcare, but think of our school system, right?
Oh,
We
yeah.
just have a model,
Yep.
that is one model. And if it doesn't fit in, then you must be ADD, ADHD, we'll medicate you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Medicating
really,
Vatas.
yeah, like what if we looked at it through the lens of Ayurveda? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah. So for example, I have one, I was talking to one of my cousins who has a kiddo that has some dyslexia, who she's, 7 and learning to read, and she loves to sing. Like, she is so rhythmic, so naturally rhythmic, but is mixing up her numbers and can't remember math facts. And so the conversation my cousin and I were having yesterday, I was like, okay, so this is a very Vata kid who is struggling to do the Pitta work.
Mhm.
And so if we contain her Vata, if we slow her Vata down or give her rhythm, then I think she'll be able to do the Pitta work she needs to do. And so so that was my thinking behind it. I didn't say that all to my cousin. I could have said that to my cousin. We just didn't have that much time. But I
Yeah.
said, what if you try having her do something rhythmic while she's learning? Like, have her stand and tap, have her keep a beat, have her sing the math, the ways that she learns, but get her Vata onto a rhythm. So in which case you can then kind of control the other doshas and have some like steadiness, some
Oh, it's
consistency.
just, it makes
That's
so
so
much
fascinating.
intuitive sense too. I just love it.
Yeah.
Amazing, this stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just don't know when somebody comes to you. There's so many tools you can use. I guess that's where your intuition really plays a part, because you could go in so many different directions. And how do you
Yeah.
know what to do with what person?
So when patients come to see me, I start with their whole life story, which is part of how functional medicine trained me. So I say, where were you born? Because I want to know what climate they were born into.
Mhm.
And then I say, were you born vaginally or C-section? Because I want to know how their gut microbiome developed. Was it with skin flora or lactobacillus vaginal flora? Then I ask about breastfeeding, and then I ask about early health. And then I always say, would you classify your early life as easy, moderate, or stressful to you? And I have a lot of adults who say, I always felt anxious. There was never any reason for it. Or, obviously there's a bunch of trauma, but it's kind of like, what was your perception? And I have patients who lived through a lot of trauma. I mean, I have one patient I remember distinctly. Her mother was a hoarder. She was never allowed to leave the house or open a window. They had dead cats in their house, and her summers were like reading a book, picking up a book, reading it, putting it down, and, just waiting for the next day until, the summer was over and she could go back to school. But she didn't take it personally in a weird way. As I kind of check in and like, listen, she's like, I just knew I had to get out of my mother's house, and that was my life then, and that it wouldn't be like that forever. And so there are ways that we embody our trauma as a way to protect ourselves as our best coping skills. Sometimes our trauma is the best friend that we've had for the longest period of time. And that if you assume things are going to be bad and go sideways, then you're prepared, you're not surprised. And so there is a protective quality to just, embodying the trauma, embodying that and expecting it. And then there's some kids who don't have outer trauma, but their Vata was so high when they were kids, they had a lot of inner, stress. And then there's some kids who have a lot of outer trauma, but their Kapha is so stable. They just knew they just had to wait. They didn't identify. So it wasn't something they had to discharge from their neuro-immune axis as adults when they
Wow,
moved
that
on.
really resonates. I would love to have you put this all together for me in a package if I could. I mean, I was going to do it for my 50th birthday. I'm going to turn 51 in May. And I would love, like, how do I come, like, I don't know, is there a thing on your website where I could go and pick a week, or do you have to call, do I have to call you?
Oh my God, for Panchakarma. Yeah. So
Yeah.
seeing me, patients can just, you can call the clinic, and we're Neuroveda Health, NEUROVEDA, health.com. You can call the clinic, or you can email the clinic at reception@neurovedahealth.com. And there is like there's a contact form on the website that you can kind of put in like where you heard about it and what you're looking for. And then you can come do a 90-minute intake with me, and we can talk about your whole life and come up with some, like solutions. You could also,
That's like heaven for the self-absorbed.
Uh-huh.
I know.
90 minutes of talking about me.
I know. It is.
Huh.
But you have to really dive in there for
No,
people to
I
say,
know.
oh, and also there's this, you have to really be able to kind of.
Yeah, I say that tongue in cheek. I mean, part of my constitution is I say I love to talk about myself, but it's mostly like I'll do it privately, like do overindulgent personality tests.
Yes.
It's like a private self-absorption.
Yes. I
But
mean, Aren't we all? Just because you admit it doesn't, should not be shameful.
No, I'm serious. This isn't me just blowing smoke to, kiss up to the podcast guests. Like, I mean,
Aw.
I got the feeling when I was speaking, like you're the girl from Cleveland is the one to do it with.
Cleveland.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then we also have, Jennifer LaValle does diet and lifestyle consultations. And so you can see her. She's a little bit less expensive than I am. And then Juliana Giles also does a similar thing. Diet, lifestyle, we'll talk about your whole life, figure out, what's helpful for you. But you can, seeing me, you're welcome to come see me in clinic. We can start remote. So we can start with that plan. And then you can sign up for an Ayurvedic Panchakarma. And then then you meet with Jennifer LaValle, because she's the one who does your plan and talks about your herbs and talks about what you do while you're here. And then you fly out you start your preparation at home with all the ghee or coconut oil if you have an allergy to ghee. And then you can come in for 5 days to our clinic. And we have a beautiful clinic. I'll show you. This is our, we're right on the Lake Union.
Oh, wow.
That's beautiful.
Seattle. And so, although the Ayurvedic room has no windows because we want to keep it dark for folks, but you can come to our clinic, and then we also do, we can also layer in whatever else is needed, like ketamine assisted psychotherapy, 1 or 2 sessions in the week that you're here, or plasmapheresis if you really want it, if you've got like deep autoimmune, which plasmapheresis was traditionally, 50, 60 years ago done for Guillain-Barré or for myasthenia gravis, although we have better treatments for it now. Still sometimes it's used, and we're now using it for long COVID as well as for longevity. So we can layer in the plasmapheresis and remove all those plasma proteins and those autoimmune antibodies. Or we can layer in other IV therapies. So things like methylene blue or NAD, or
Nice.
even just a Myers cocktail, or to get you some nutrition. So we can
Nice.
do that all together.
All right. I'm going to sell some Bitcoin.
I know. I think we need a retreat.
I know, for sure. For nurses
both
listening,
know.
I mean, there's,
Yeah.
for nurses listening to this, anybody listening to this can get a continuing education credit for listening to this podcast. Just go over to rnegade.pro, register if you're not registered. If you are, find the podcast, take the quiz and the little evaluation, you get your CE credit. And then if you want to learn much more from Gillian, which I can't wait to dive in, we're so excited to have your content on our platform. I mean, I've always wanted to go down an Ayurvedic rabbit hole, but I kept getting distracted by other sparkly objects. Still
That's
scientific, still geekery, but yeah. But for nurses who are listening to this and would like to learn more from Gillian, her podcast, which you want to talk a little bit about your podcast?
Yep.
Sure. So Ayurveda podcast for complex health is now on RNegade website.
Yep.
For all the CE. And so Ayurveda podcast for complex health was originally podcast for healing neurology. So some of the episodes will say that as well. But we've prioritized really bringing on guests who talk about this neuroimmune axis. And so there's everything from talking about microglial cells or immunology to talking about women's fitness in the perimenopausal stage and how we need to recognize that our bodies are different and changing, to what are some of the other episodes? We've just released episodes on integrative oncology, on the Ayurvedic neuroimmune axis perspective, on cerebrospinal fluid leaks and spiky leaky syndrome with Brianna Cardenas, RPA, and Andy Maxwell, who's a pediatric cardiologist in San Francisco. I'm trying to think what else, but we've talked about the glycocalyx. There's just
it's like cotton candy content for geeks and the pathologically curious.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I really started it as a way that I could bring on guests and kind of ask all the questions I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Why do you think you're here? Exactly. Well, Gillian, thank you so much for joining us. It was a great introduction to your story. You're a great storyteller. I could tell you've done it. You've refined it, but I could tell, if I was just with you in casual conversation, you're very smart. I love your way of recall and, interjecting a metaphor or a name or a book, that's a very special quality when you're a teacher. So I just wanted to shine a light on that quality. And I can't wait to listen for myself and for the nurses, the RNegade nurses, to listen to your podcast and learn much more from you, and for me to do it in person and indulge myself.
I would love to offer you that. Please
Thank
come.
you. Thank
And
you.
thank you so much for everything you're saying. I really appreciate it. I'm really honored and grateful to be on your show today, and to be sharing the podcast with your listeners. Thank you.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you. We're going to say
Awesome.
goodbye to you and talk about you behind your back now.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Renegades.